Hello and welcome back to another video. So I finally got the time to finish the Legacy of Yangchen and I need to rant about it. First of all, some disclaimers for the following shows below. I have a lot to talk about. Yeah, let's get right on into this. First off, I think that this book was a lot better than the first installment of Yangchen's story, and there are a few things that feed into that, and I feel like overall, the plot and the storytelling were just a lot better. You know, while reading this, I felt a lot more immersed in the story with its characters and everything. I didn't feel like I was being whisked every which way without having any attachment like I did in the first book. And I think a big factor of this is that FCE did a better job focusing the storytelling on the characters rather than just all the events that are happening. And like, you know, it's one thing to say like, oh, this thing happened versus talking about one's experience and what they felt while that said thing was happening. Going on to some really cool things that I think this book brought to us. One thing that I thought was really cool was expanding on the reputation of the White Lotus. So I wasn't really actually originally gonna even talk about this at all, but I've been rewatching The Legend of Korra and I noticed something pretty interesting. So, you know, in season 3, Zahir goes on to explain what the Red Lotus is, and he kind of explains that the Red Lotus is exactly what the White Lotus was before the White Lotus outwardly started serving the Avatar. And, you know, this is exactly what we see with the White Lotus during Yangchen's lifetime. And, you know, it's this group working to bring balance in its own way, and it honestly makes a lot of sense. The Avatar is really just like an OP person, and their decisions have a huge impact on the world around them and like also huge ramifications and just insane things. But anyways, yeah, personally, I really enjoyed the cast of characters in this book. I think Kavik's return to the group was really well written in the sense that I always felt on the fence of everybody's relationship as well. It felt like it really kept me on my toes, and you know, although I think he did a great job of better connecting me to the characters in this book, I do have a lot to say about Yangchen's characterization after reading both of the books and also reading your guys' comments actually. It's actually like the biggest part of what I have to say about this book. And a huge part of what makes Yangchen's character interesting is the fact that she's an air nomad that does things that contradict her culture in order to do her job as the Avatar. And I say interesting in quotes because I know a lot of fans might find her characterization a little bland to other characters in the series. And as I read this, I would honestly have to agree with that to an extent because I feel like there are many interesting parts of her that were not expanded on enough. Like throughout both of the novels, I feel like it was always just her problems and her anxieties that were just like constantly being thrown at us. And from Kavik's perspective, all we see is a tired and frustrated Yangchen. And then from her perspective, it's like generally the same thing. Like it was just kind of frustrating. There wasn't really that dynamic where you get the outside and then the inside. It was just like very flat, very surface level. Now, don't get me wrong, like you also see Yangchen being extremely cunning and caring, but in all honesty, her character doesn't have that much depth. Like, if you asked me to characterize her after reading both of these novels, all I could come up with would probably just be like smart and caring, which is a trait every single Avatar has to some extent. Like when we look at Aang, like we saw this like goofy, kind-hearted, no-stress kid that developed into a very mature teenager that was ready to take on the world. And like the same was with Korra, like who was a very hot-headed, impulsive teen who grew up to become more patient and to become more caring with everybody around her, even her enemies. Yeah, there was always this like large curve in character growth the other avatars we've seen. And like don't even get me started with Kyoshi because like I've already ranted about that. My point is, as far as character depth goes, compared to the other avatars we've seen, Yangchen's character lacks that strong development that we've seen time and time again. I do have suggestions on like ways that I think FCE could have improved on so our connection with her was better. One is to delve out her childhood. In the first novel, like we start off in one of her many possessions, like at the early age of 8 or something. And you know, this instance gave us a very brief look into how she lived as a young avatar with the other nuns and also like her sister. And you know, after this, we don't get any more of those flashbacks into her upbringing. And I just feel like referencing her childhood more would shine light on the parts of her character that are just her, like not just the traits that encompass her being the Avatar. I think with the other avatars, we've seen a lot of their own character shine through this big character of being you know, the hero, the Avatar. Yeah, and number 2 is to kind of just delve out her reaction to her banishment. You know, like Kavik reacted as expected after learning Yangchen had been banished from her home. And I was beyond frustrated to see that she kind of was just like accepted it and like was very mature in the sense she was like, you know, I have to follow my cultural rules still. Like if I do this, like, you know, I'll be banished. Like it makes sense. But I'm just like, wouldn't you have more of a reaction to that? Like, I just wish that FCE could have at least given more perspective on her side. There didn't have to be any more external dialogue to it. I just wanted to get her thoughts and like her feelings on the whole thing. It was just like frustrating to not see that happen. And number 3 just kind of just goes on to this idea of just like delve out those vulnerable moments. Like Yangchen had a handful of vulnerable moments like throughout this novel, and I just feel like they were never expanded out enough on. Like one of my favorite moments is like at the end of the book where she finally meets Jetsun. You know, she like breaks down, like she cries and she's like, you know, like this is hard, like I just need a break. Like that's like the only moment you see her become like truly vulnerable. And like even then it's like cut really short because Jetsun just starts talking to her and like upbringing her, I mean, like as she should, but it's just as like there was no more description to the whole scene. Like it was just so short-lived and unsatisfying, and it left me really frustrated. And those were just things that I think that if they were delved out more, I would have felt like more towards her character, and I would have seen her character in a better light, in the sense of like her character is more interesting, has more depth, and is more real. Because I feel like these books were supposed to make her feel like a real person compared to the series where we see her being like prayed to like some type of god. I feel like that it could have been done better. But yeah, anyways, just going off of that scene where she like breaks down and cries and she's just like had enough, I kind of wanted to talk more about this idea of like the evil avatar. And I say evil in quotes because I just kind of, in this sense, I kind of just mean, you know, an avatar, a person that's just tired of dealing with humanity, in the sense of like humanity tends to make the same problems over and over again. We will never have a stop of issues. We will always have problems because, you know, in one of the scenes of this book, under the influence of one of her past lives, Yangchen presents another avatar that is just tired. He's just like, why am I doing this? Like, why can't they just like deal with it on their own? And, you know, this makes the presence of the White Lotus extremely important in this sense because, you know, every avatar has their own flaws. And honestly, as a society, you can't depend on the will of one person. And that's like reflected through the politics of the Avatar universe and like even in our own reality. Yeah, you know, we've seen how an evil avatar could be created in the season 2 of Legend of Korra, but like, what if like the avatar's soul is like just corrupted? Like what if the avatar just stops? Like they're just tired. You know, it makes me wonder a lot about how the past and the future lives work, in the sense of like all these people are reincarnated into the next, Rava goes on to the next body, la-di-la-di-da. Like, is there a guarantee that every single person that Rava goes into, that their soul is like incorruptible in every single life? Like, is there prerequisite for being like the avatar? Is every avatar guaranteed to fight for the overall good every single time? You know, just something I thought that was interesting and I wish I got more explanation of. Like, we see avatars that kind of like didn't live up to the standard of what society holds the avatar to, which is like an immense amount of pressure and everything. Like we saw that with Avatar Kuruk. And I just feel like it's an interesting concept to think about in this universe. So last thing I would like to talk about is kind of just the plot of this book. Like I've mentioned before, I really enjoyed it. I think you did a great job keeping information from us and like saving those things for later for that surprise factor. There were a few chapters in this book where I was just like confused about like the time skips, only to be shown something really cool later on. For instance, the scene where Yangchen is talking to Yingsu while Tapa's just combustion bending and going crazy. And then all of a sudden when that chapter ends, it skips. And then apparently Yingsu died, and I was just so confused because like, guess what? She wasn't dead, and you only find that out like many chapters later. It was just really cool. I think I really liked that aspect of the book because it kept you stringed along and made it feel like you weren't really reading. You were just like, bro, what the heck just happened? Like, it just makes you want to keep reading. And honestly, it felt like somebody's Yu-Gi-Oh card turn where all they had was like face down cards, and at the end of the game they just reveal all their cards and they just absolutely just destroy their opponent. It was pretty awesome in my opinion. I really enjoyed the last 100 pages or so, and everything just like comes together in those last pages. And there were like a lot of really surprising aspects of this book that I really enjoyed. I won't talk about all of them, but be sure to let me know what you guys thought. And one of them was just Callian being like Chicey's baby daddy. You know, that's just interesting to say the least. I just feel like kind of weird. I just feel like there has to be some kind of weird power dynamic in that relationship. It's not something I've thought a lot about, and I don't really want to think that much about, but it makes sense for the plot though. Anyways, those were a lot of my thoughts on this book. Feel free to comment what you guys thought about this book and anything else Avatar related, and thanks for watching.